So, very excited to be here today. This topic is amazing. It's about unresolved problems. This one's going to be a little bit of a feather ruffler, and it kind of falls under the category of the truth hurts type thing. Um, Somebody asked me the other day what I do. You know, I guess they were asking me what I do for work and for money. And it's an interesting question. First of all, do you know how to answer that question? If you have a job, you probably do. And I see some friends joining. There's a great Substack to follow right there, Diary of a Relationship Coach, and I got to meet her the other day. She's going to be on our new show, which is really exciting for Substack. We have a show that I'm starting actually this Thursday. It's the first time we're going to do it, and it's called The Writer's Way, where we're going to be, interviewing writers, and that's an interesting thing. We don't really get to meet writers all the time. But we're going to find out what they write about and why, right? That's the writer's way. And also get some tips on how they're using the platform of Substack to grow their impact and all of that. It's a phenomenon. It's kind of the Wild West right now for writers. Writers are very, very much on the scene in a social media environment right now, but we don't really get to meet them. So I like to come live and let you guys, put myself out there, which you now know freaks me out and scares me. Um, make myself vulnerable because I think there's a lot of power in vulnerability. Are you ready to be vulnerable today, or are you kind of hiding in the clouds behind some sort of avatar or something like that? So anyway, I'm excited about this topic, excited about a bunch of stuff coming. What are you saying? She says, love this space where you're committed to a purpose of learning and creating. Yeah. It's interesting. There's a struggle between that. If you're somebody that puts yourself out there, the perception is that I'm here to share with you and give you some stuff. Bare sage. I've never felt more vulnerable than I have in the past 4 days. Let us know why. Why what's going on in the past 4 days? Bear sage. I think you should just keep that as your real name from now on. But I'd love to know why. Because we're in the live format. The reason why we also in the podcast studio, so this is going to be edited and much shorter for the podcast to make sense with Dr. JC podcast, which is getting almost 250,000 downloads a month right now, which is nuts. And we have paid advertising and everything like that. So my wife passed on Thursday. Okay. That's tough. That's tough. I'm so sorry to hear that. It's an interesting thing because I have a lot of, I've experienced a lot of that myself in my life, and they're constantly having people. So what I like to do is when somebody passes, the hardest thing about it. So this is part of the interface response system. Is here we have a stimulus which is very challenging, and that is a tragedy, right? Just dealing with the process. Yeah, exactly. Not my grief, but our children's. Yeah. So it just keeps stacking and getting more and more challenging. So all I would say is one of the things that I like to ask people when they're going through that, and I would wish somebody would ask it of me, is rather than spending so much time saying, I'm so sorry, which I understand, I like to ask people to share something amazing about that person and bring that back. Right, because loss is very, very challenging. I've experienced quite a bit of loss. So what I like to do is maybe take out a pen and write about, what was so amazing about that person, what their legacy, their footprint is, and make that catch, like let that catch fire. So in any case, my thoughts and prayers with you and your family, um, and maybe share something amazing about that person. What was amazing about that person? Okay. So a couple of things, just we got the writer's way that starts on Thursday. So, if you're not following the Make Sense Substack, follow it, subscribe. And the other thing is that I just started today. Today, this is being recorded and live streamed on the 11th of August. And we just today launched for the first time our paid platform. Like people have been signing up as paid subscribers for my Substack just to support us, but everybody was getting the equal share. But now we have this kind of premium service, and I just began it today where if you're a paid subscriber, which is $8 a month, which is nuts. So you'll get all the content, but you'll get tons more content because I write every day. and you'll get that premium service. But also, I've started a vlog that I'm doing every day. I know that sounds crazy. Well, 5 days a week, not Saturdays and Sundays, where it's called Things That Make You Go, hmm. And I just recorded the first one. And our paid subscribers, that's going to be a part of the premium service. They're going to get every day that vlog, and it's going to be this thing that they can have every day where they can say, oh wow, what an interesting perspective to allow myself to have today, and not just hand the keys of trust over to the way my computer boots up and start your day like that, which is what you'll get from this. So yeah, so if you're a paid subscriber, Lori, which would probably mean somebody, if you're a free subscriber, that's one thing. But if you elevate and upgrade to the paid subscriber, which is $8 a month, or it's even cheaper if you do it annually, it's like $80 a year to be a paid subscriber and get everything from me, which is nuts. But if you do that, you'll get the vlog. The vlog is going to be like sent out as an email just to the paid subscription. Okay, enough about that. Let's start this. This is unresolved problems, and I call it unresolved problems that we pretend to fix. Isn't that interesting? How we pretend to fix things, and that's the whole nature of saying that's an unresolved problem. But it's not something that's happening to you. You're not a victim of the problem. What we're saying is maybe it's just something that you have addressed as something that needs to be addressed, but pretended that it's all set, or maybe it's going to go away. So I begin this by saying this is going to be one of those that might ruffle some feathers. And this episode and eventual post is not really for everyone, which is a big theme with the Make Sense Substack. It's just like acknowledging, are you brave enough to not be for everyone? Well, that's what I'm doing here today, is I'm sharing a topic that is not for everyone. So I guess call that brave courage, or maybe even with a side order of stupidity. So the reason why it might ruffle some feathers is you might be somebody right now at this time that's comfortable with quick fixes, right? That you've managed to overlook. Nobody acknowledges that their quick fix is a quick fix. So you've managed to somehow put them in a blind spot and overlook. Or maybe you're somebody that's become numb to discomfort, right? I told you something before. I practice voluntary discomfort, but most of us are wired for comfort, so we try to stay away from discomfort. So you might be numb to discomfort, and also willing and kind of open to thinking right now, which is a belief that technology and modern advancements possess the power to outrun the consequences of neglect. Let me read that again, because we're in a world right now where things are getting more efficient and easier and all that stuff, which we can perceive that as a good thing. But are you somebody that believes that technological advancements and modern advancements possess the power to outrun the consequences of your own neglect? Well, if you are that person, this one might sting a little bit. Okay. That's what this is about. So, but for those who are open and curious and ready to take note of the lump under the rug, under the carpet, right? The whole idea of brushing things under the carpet, um, it might just be the most conversation that you and I ever have, if you're open and curious. I like to say that the lump under the carpet is invisible until the day that we trip over it, right? So that's just the way the universe works. That's part of God working in mysterious ways. So I want to share with you a strange paradox. So a lot of my work comes from me just pointing something out. So I don't need to have an opinion about it. I don't need to be right about it. But the Make Sense Substack, my podcast, everything is just about saying, have you ever noticed this? Which would require an open and curious person. But here's an interesting paradox that I see us living in right now. So on one end, we're in a situation where we've never moved faster, been more connected, or more equipped to efficiently solve problems. So that's one end of the paradox. We have all these amazing tools. We're using one right now. Substack is one of them right now. Yet somehow, the harder and faster we push forward with the use and help of these tools, the bigger the mess we leave behind. So in other words, the bump under the carpet is getting noticeable, and many of us are starting to trip over it because of all of this speed and efficiency and ease that we have. So, my observation of that paradox is these advancements that we have, that we're being accommodated with and supplied with in society, are not actually solving problems. This is just an observation. They're not actually solving our problems. If you think about it, they're kind of just allowing us to get better at hiding our problems. Isn't that interesting? So what I'm saying is I'm kind of looking at advancements of technology, and I use a lot of them, and saying, huh, is that solving my problem, or is it just making it easier for me to hide my problem? So this is the topic, unresolved problems, which is an indication that we're kind of in many ways pretending that there's no lump under the carpet. And it's easier to pretend than ever because of these advancements. Isn't that interesting? So I'll just read something that one of you said. I was feeling thinking into this, right? You'll notice that we kind of talk about topics that most people are thinking about, and society at large is a dopamine hit, right? It's a little bit more than a dopamine hit, because this dopamine hit makes you forget about other stuff. That collective, we have become uncomfortable and avoidant, and kind of change or pain. Yeah, isn't that interesting? You have an amazing story too. So we don't want to learn better ways to cope because it causes struggle. Yeah, isn't that interesting? We don't want to do things better. We just want to do things easier. Now, nobody will admit that. So you would have to make an observation of that. So I want to welcome a couple of people. I see Harshi has joined us, Writing Diverse, Brian Frank. Hey, by the way, feel free to drop the links of your Substack if you're watching live on Substack. If you're watching on Zoom, or I'm sorry, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, we're also streaming live on Substack. If you never check out Substack, go check it out. And I would recommend that you guys all follow and maybe subscribe to one another, in this little community. I'm very, very big on that. Hello and thank you. Ooh, we got a PhD there, Harshi. Okay. So let's talk about what I call the illusion of progress. This is fascinating. Everywhere you look, we're being sold solutions that appear to fix things, but really just disguise the warning signs. It's kind of like, and the analogy that I give is it's kind of like taking a little piece of black tape and putting it over the flashing check engine light in your car, right? Or hiding the urgent bills that you have on your desk right now if you're at home, hiding them out of sight, right? So, we have this ability to take the symptom and make it disappear, which is what medication does in many, many places. There's a place for everything, but we're very, very good and skilled at making the symptom. Okay, great. Bear Sage has just shared his Substack, and I will definitely go back and follow that. Oh my God, look at this. Vicky Gutierrez. I think that's my Vicky Gutierrez, my friend. Is that you? Good to see you, my friend. So the symptom disappears. Remember, this is going to be edited for the podcast. Right now, we're live. So if you guys have questions and you want to interact on Substack, or even on YouTube, please feel free to ask questions. Yes, it is you, my runner. I miss you. So the symptom disappears from view, but the engine is still failing. And that's that reference of the blinking light that we put the tape over. And it's failing often faster than before. So I'd like to point out how this paradox is unfolding in several common areas. So I'm going to share some common areas that it might be showing up, this paradox of how everything is becoming easier and faster and more efficient, but at the same time, the lump under the carpet is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. So first, let's talk about mental health. This one hits home because I have mental health, and also my wife is a mental health therapist and a sex therapist. So very, very much a topic of discussion here. So when it comes to mental health, here's the observation. The rates of anxiety, depression, I've suffered from both, right? And I still have an ongoing battle with it, but I've just got a lot of tools now. One of them is being here with you today. But the rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout are skyrocketing. So that means that what we're doing is not working, or the cause of it is getting worse. But instead of addressing that those things at their roots, social isolation, overstimulation, poor nutrition, disconnection from nature, we reach out for fast relief, which I totally get in the form of things like medication, distraction, and those dopamine hits that Dawn was talking about, right? So we reach out for things to hide the symptom. And when we're talking about mental health, and I get it, I get it. And I'm not saying everybody. I see a therapist, right? We do great work. I just had this experience where we were digging deep into some of my childhood trauma using a technique. I don't know if anybody's heard of it called ART. So fascinating, where you're following this ball that's bouncing side to side with your eyes. And what it's doing is it's helping you retrace an event by using both sides of your brain. It was a wonderful, wonderful situation. I very, very much recommend if you see a therapist. And if you don't, entertain the idea. I didn't have like this resounding problem. I just thought it would be a good idea to let somebody look under the hood. So I'm not here, by the way, in the regards to medication and mental health. I'm not here to demonize medication. In fact, I wouldn't demonize anything because I haven't made up my mind about anything yet, right? Medication can be life-saving and it's got its place, but the deeper patterns go unexamined. That's what we're talking about, the lump under the carpet. The cycle continues. We feel better for a while, but as we know, the problem returns, right? And it also sometimes returns stronger. It's not just bones that grow back stronger, it's problems as well. Problems can get bigger and stronger and also in turn harder to untangle. So what we want to avoid is taking medications in my observation to counteract the downsides of other medications, right? That's something to point out. That's part of this paradox of an unresolved problem. So what about obesity and the disappearing muscle problem? So this one hits home, right? For the record, I don't know how many people know this, but I've been a health transformation coach on the side. I'm not just a substacker and a podcaster and a dad and a human. So I've been a health transformation coach for almost 19 years now. And that kind of stemmed from me having a transformation. I lost 80 pounds like almost 19 years ago and kept it off. And at 54, feel like I'm in fantastic health. So this one hits home. So look at the paradox here. America's obesity epidemic is one of the clearest examples of unresolved problems. And it's an unresolved problem trap. This is what's interesting. So pharmaceutical companies, which have billions and billions of dollars, don't be mistaken about that. If you have billions of dollars to do advertising, let's just say your Substack will grow fast, right? So they have billions of dollars, and they're basically giving us medications right now in the realm of obesity and weight loss that, in essence, it's a very ingenious idea. They turn off the brain's hunger signals, the food noise, right? Which is also coming with advertisements that's basically teaching Americans right now. Take note of the TV and the advertisements and the radio and the podcast. This is one thing I said, no advertisements about medications on my podcast, right? Although I heard them advertise gummies for like marijuana the other day. That's funny, but I didn't tell them not to do that. So what's happening now in this trap is that, we're having the success of the brain noise, the hunger noise being shut off, and the pounds drop, right? Headlines cheer and everybody moves toward the herd, right? And the perceived results. But then we look at the data, right? The data starts to show up, right? We always kind of know there's an upside and a downside to everything, but we're really good at the data being the lump under the carpet, right? So we look at the data. We're not just losing fat; we're losing muscle as well. The data's there, which we're very good at pretending the data is not there or finding somebody that says the data is not right, and that's cognitive bias, right? But we're losing muscle and we're losing it fast. In some cases, if you want to look it up, you're losing almost 11 pounds of muscle mass in a year with some of these big name brands. I'm not going to mention any of them. And what that's doing is prompting a new diagnosis that's being talked about amongst general practitioners and endocrinologists in the chat rooms called skinny fat. We have a new diagnosis where somebody can be skinny and fat at the same time because they have no muscle mass. And the problem with that is here's part of the data that we see right now. Here's the paradox. So we're losing, weight, which is what we've been trained to think is the problem, but we're not losing fat. We're losing muscle. And just by chance, lean muscle mass in the data is the number one predictor of longevity. When you get into your 60s and 70s, if you have no lean muscle mass, you're not going to be able to open up a jar or maintain balance. And this leads into broken bones and all of that stuff. So the projections, you want to look at this problem. The projections right now are saying that the weight loss industry, because of these new advancements, is projected by like 2035 to be like a $535 billion industry. So this is a big problem because this is a big unresolved problem because what if that happens? If they succeed at being a $535 billion program, the whole healthcare system will collapse, right? It's a big one. So there's an example of something that's happening all because we were too focused on shrinking bodies instead of strengthening them. So these are things I remember I said this might ruffle some feathers and might sting because if you're involved in these things, you're not a bad person. And I get it. I get it. But if you don't wake up and acknowledge that you're part of the paradox, and it's not your fault. But if you wake up and become conscious and arm yourself with the weapon of awareness, which is what this whole show is about, and my Substack is all about arming you with awareness with one goal in mind, to get you back as the shot caller of making up your own mind, thinking for yourself. We live in a world that thinks for us. Make that observation today. So, what about relationships? My wife's a relationship coach, a sex therapist. So, this is a big one. We just had a great conversation out on our porch about marriage and relationships and stuff. And I love my wife to no end. To no end. That's what I'd love you to know about my brand is I love my family. So think about relationships. We patch deep emotional wounds with temporary gestures like buying gifts, which can turn into like love bombing and things like that. Man, relationships are complicated. We'll say things like, "I'm sorry," or planning a weekend trip without addressing the patterns that cause the hurt. So, one of the challenges with relationships in this paradox is if you really do the work, which will fruit a beautiful relationship, it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. It's not easy, right? So on the surface, when you're just patching things up, the tension fades, but beneath, the resentment grows. Eventually, it erupts with a force that is bigger than before. So there's that thing. So Stephen Covey, that was part of my morning routine today, and you'll see that the paid subscribers. Once again, we're starting today to offer our paid subscribers a daily vlog. And I'm so excited about this because when you listen to this every morning, it's just going to be like 3 minutes to 5 minutes. If you listen to this daily vlog every morning, it's going to set you up for success because it's going to stop your program mind and it's going to give you a new vantage point and a perspective of the day that will make you go, which is why that series is called Things That Make You Go, And that starts today. So if you're not one of our $8 a month, cheaper if you did it for the year, paid subscribers, there's no Substack that's going to provide more value than ours. So, and remember, you can always stop. If you don't get your $8 value from the Make Sense Substack, then get the heck out. So Stephen Covey says he's the author of a book called The Speed of Trust. This is Stephen Covey Jr. We cannot talk our way out of a problem that we behaved ourselves into. Let me say that again. We cannot talk our way out of out of a problem that we have behaved ourselves into. So how do we get out of a problem that we've behaved ourselves into? Well, we must behave our way out of it. And that's the whole concept of if you have lost the trust of your following, of your family, of your friends, of your wife, your husband, or your partner, right? That's because you've behaved a certain way. So you have to behave back into trust. I love that. And that's more unresolved problems, right? So let's talk about the core pattern. We're almost there. So let's talk about the core pattern. Let's look at the core patterns. In every example, the pattern seems to be the same in observation. Remember, I don't have an opinion. This is just something that I've noticed, and I'm sharing it with you in question, saying, have you noticed this? It seems that we address the symptom, but leave the source untouched. Duh, right? Why do we do that? My thought is because real solutions take time. I just told you about the relationship thing. They require self awareness, discipline, and often uncomfortable changes to things like our habits, our environments, and our priorities. It takes work. Most of the things that we desire have mysteriously been placed on the other side of a big pile of duty, the work, right? So we don't like duty. We try to stay away from it, right? So that's something that we have to know. So I understand why we take the escape route. Well, we look for the hall pass. They're inconvenient, right? These things that we have to do. And we live in a world that is basically promoting and preaching efficiency and convenience. So if you come across something that's inconvenient, unconsciously your body and your brain has been trained to say this is a bad idea. We are actually running from inconvenience, and that's part of the paradox is as things get easier and more advanced and more efficient with technology and AI and all of that stuff. I mean, we see the data. Here's the data on, chat gpt and all of that stuff. People are relying on that to think for them. We're not doing research anymore, right? We don't look at maps and look up data and read books to find facts. We don't need to do that. And we're seeing that people's cognition, there's some studies out of MIT that say that people's brains and cognition is going down as a result of that. So that concerns me. So that's why I read all these books. My best friend is Jim Quick, and we talk about the brain as a muscle that you have to train. So do we need a collapse? Do we need everything to fall apart? Maybe. That's kind of the way things have to get bad enough for us to do something. But I like to entertain the idea of saying, well, can we avoid the collapse? And I say, absolutely. So this is the part where I say, now it's your turn. Right. So for anyone that doesn't want to have any responsibility for their life, stop listening now. This is the part where you want to get the heck out of here. So here's the real reason that I'm sharing this. It's not to shame, but to shed light, point out, and arm you with the awareness of this stuff. That's it. You're going to do with it whatever you want to do with it. Because if you can see this pattern in the big systems around you, then you can also see it in your own life. So you have to first notice it. It's easiest to notice these things in other people and in society. But then it gives you the ability to say, well, what role do I play? When my wife and I are having some sort of I don't know if I would call it like a dispute or, heated conversation about something, we always notice that both of us are trying to be right. So what we do is reframe it, right? And we say, well, what role can we take accountability for? That's not easy to do, right? It's a gut check. So ask yourself these questions. What problems have I covered up instead of resolved? There's a great question. How about this one? What and who am I tolerating in my life? Build a tolerant list. What are you tolerating? Meaning you don't have to have it, but you're putting up with it. That's a great list to diminish as you go. How about this? Where am I chasing the appearance of progress instead of the reality of it? Oh, where am I chasing the appearance, the illusion of progress, but at the same time running from the reality of it? I call that fake work. Stuff that keeps you busy but has nothing to do with moving you towards your goals and dreams. What warning lights have I covered up with black tape in life? Are the bills hidden on your desk right now? Right? I'll give you an example transparently. I need to get 2 new tires for our car because I can see that they're balding a little bit. I'm very good at not looking at those tires. Right. But now it's out in the open. So um, if we continue to ignore things, the cost is big, right? The cost is always bigger of ignoring things than the cost of facing them now. And we know that, but we still ignore. So I hate that. I hate that about being a human, and I hate that about being just acknowledging all of this stuff, but I hate it because it's true and it hurts. The truth hurts. So here are some of the thoughts that I have, what I call dragon thoughts. And this is just my summation of it. And remember, if somebody else, I'm a scientist, if somebody else has a better way of looking at these, a perspective, I want to hear it. Even if it's negative, even if it goes against my core principles and the things that I have decided are right, I want to hear different perspectives because I don't need to be right. That's what this stands for right here. Hmm. HMMM. Haven't made up my mind. I haven't made up my mind about anything, and I don't think I ever will. I don't need to because I'm open and curious. The write protect switch on my brain, my SD card is open. I am not closing it because I know that I'm wrong a lot. And that's a wonderful thing. It's called drifting and shifting, right? In order to shift, you have to first be able to catch your drift. So, my thoughts. We can't control every system around us, right? Let's not try to drink water with a fork here today. Let's just take a baby step. And remember, in Buddhism, they talk about the two arrows of suffering. The first arrow of suffering is the one that is shot by the unpredictable and uncontrollable world around us. We don't control the first arrow. But the second arrow, right, that we often see that we have aimed at our own foot, we control. We control that, and that is our reaction and our response. We can decide whether we're willing to live life or I'm sorry, we can decide whether we're willing to live with this illusion of progress or demand the real thing. I demand the real thing. Harshi, you're in that right now with the arrows, right? You have just been struck with the first arrow of suffering, and you had nothing you could do about that. Um, and that's kind of why we take steps to say, it's hard to say what to look at the bright side, but you have children, and I've been through this by the way, so I feel for you. Um, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't you, Harshi, it was Bear. It was Bear that said that. Sorry about that. Um, when we face tragedy, that's the first arrow of suffering, right? And when you're dealt with that blow, that sucks. And your knee jerk reflex and all of your emotions and your stress response system is going to do what it's going to do. And it doesn't ask for any permission, right? The lower levels of your brain, which control primarily all of your thoughts, feelings, and actions initially, do not ask for permission, right? That just happens. So don't get upset when you get upset, but take note of that you're drifting, and from that place, make a conscious decision with that second arrow of suffering, what you're going to do with it. I love that game. So we can decide whether or not we're willing to live with this illusion of progress or demand the real thing. The choice, know this, is uncomfortable, but it's also the difference between a future that we're merely surviving in and one where we're truly thriving. So you're either in survival mode or, as I like to say, thrival mode. I choose survival mode most of the time, but sometimes I have to catch myself drifting offshore. When you're in the water and all of a sudden you realize your beach towel is way up there, you have to catch yourself in that drift in order to shift. Just don't beat yourself up when you find yourself drifting, because we live in a world that is very, very much promoting drifting. God works in mysterious ways. So that leaves the choice in the hands of the experiencer. You're the life experiencer. So the choice is yours. Do you take the red pill? We're going to have a matrix reference here. Do you take the red pill and confront the lump under the rug and do the work, the uncomfortable, inconvenient work that resolves the problem? Or here's the convenience, right? And the efficient advancements of technology and the comfort. Or do you take the red pill, which will have you wake up to, I'm sorry, or you take the blue pill, which has you wake up tomorrow, right? And once again, hand over the keys of trust to your programmed environment and mind, your programmed, conditioned environment and mind. You hand it over and say, you tell me what to do, right? So all I have to say is permit yourself to sit with this before you decide what you're going to do. This is the hard part. You've just been in a jacuzzi with the dragon. And the jacuzzi is where everything makes sense. Yeah, amen. Amen. That's right. And you see the other people saying the same thing. So I just encourage you to sit with this for a moment before you decide. And in that space, in between what you've just heard and your initial conditioned response, sit in that space and allow yourself to look at it from multiple vantage points. This is why I wear glasses without lenses. It's to remind me that I call the shots. I don't want anyone else to tell me what lens to look through. Isn't that interesting? So this is what's going to change your life today. Make sense? So, as a reminder, thank you so much to our paid subscribers. You're going to get the first of the blog series today. Um, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make the $8 that people spend a month the silliest thing in the world. My goal is to have people call me and text me and say, I just refuse to only pay $8 for this. And that's my goal. I won't change it. But in any case, I'll tell you, my goal and dream is to do this full time for a living. I still run lots of businesses and things like that. And I love those. But what I really love is hanging out at home and just being in the creative process, hanging out with people like you and spending all the time I can with my kids because they're growing up fast and being able to maintain my health and all of that stuff. We're minimalists. We don't need fancy cars and big houses. We do very well, but we don't spend it. We spend money on experience and helping others. So if you're going to support this Substack, you're going to help a lot of people, including my family. So I love and appreciate you all. Remember, if you learned something today, give it away. Take what you learned and put it into the arena of play and have a nice day. And by the way, I'll see you next time. Love you and appreciate you. Have a good day.